Welcome to Messy Liberation, the podcast that dives deep into feminism, business, and personal growth. I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
And I'm Taina Brown. Get ready for another messy conversation through the eyes of two intersectional feminist coaches.
Let's get messy. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about children's movies or TV shows that we either enjoyed when we were children and why we enjoyed them, or that we enjoy now as adults and why there's still that connection, why there's still that thing in us to just like really identify with some of the children's programming that's out there.
And maybe also things that talk to bigger issues than just what you might expect from traditional kids programming. So if you have kids, these might be some of the things that we think would be like good opportunities to watch with them, depending on their age, and that you can feel like you're not just showing them fluff, but there's actually some meat to it that like handle bigger issues. And the reason was, go ahead.
I'm going to say, or if you feel like your inner child needs a little bit of healing, these might be some good things to put on your list.
Too. Yes. And it started because you brought up something I have never seen, nor had I even heard of.
Which I was shocked.
This will probably show my age, which is fine because I feel like that's just going to be a recurring theme for us, which is fine. So tell people what it is and about it because I don't know it.
It's Avatar, The Last Airbender, not the blue people. That is something completely different. It was an animated series on Nickelodeon years ago, probably in the early aughts, I think. And then from that, it's kind of evolved into some multimedia stuff. So there are like comics out that you can purchase that kind of have like side stories and whatnot. M. Night Shyamalan was tapped to do the live action movie years ago. I think it was like maybe 2007, 2008, maybe. And it was awful. It was really, really bad. And one of the reasons why it was bad, I will say this, is that in the animated series, all the characters are some type of Asian or First Nations, Indigenous people. And in the original live action that M. Night Shyamalan did, the cast was like really, really whitewashed. Oh. And so there was a lot of backlash about that. But then also the story, the way that it was chopped up didn't really make sense. And it just he was not the best choice, I think.
He messed
it up. Yeah.
Well, tell people what he messed up. Like what makes it something that for you like resonates, that still feels good, that makes you think like this is something worth watching.
Yeah. Well, the characters didn't feel like the same characters from the animated series. And I think the reason that the show and the fandom is as strong as it is because the way that it was originally created, one, the storytelling was just amazing. Like I told you, I think I've rewatched the animated series about 12, 13, maybe 25 times by now. I had it on DVDs when that was a thing, when you bought things on DVD. And one of the reasons why it's such a fans really connect to it is because the storytelling is amazing and the characters are really complicated characters. They're not these like topical, one-dimensional or two-dimensional characters. Like there is a growth arc for each of the characters. And most of the characters, most of the main characters are children, right? They're kids between the ages of like 10 and 16, and they're out to save the world. And so it brings in a lot of complexity about like, how do children respond to things like war and poverty and friendships and toxic family relationships, right? And so a lot of that was missing in the M. Night Shyamalan live action version because it felt like it was just trying to be like this big blockbuster with like all these special effects, because the premise is that some of these characters are also, they can bend natural elements. So I'm about to nerd out right now, but there are earthbenders, airbenders, waterbenders, and firebenders. And some people can't bend at all. But, you know, if you were born in the Earth tribe, you may or may not be an earthbender, right? Or if your parents were benders, then that gene may be passed on to you, but you might have a different style of bending, right? So, and then there's like the avatar, which is kind of like the, what you could call like the Dalai Lama, right? Who's like the spiritual leader of all the 4 nations. And he is reincarnated every time the one avatar dies, another avatar is born. And the avatar is able to learn all 4 different types of bending. And so his or her role is to like keep things in balance and keep things in harmony. Okay, I'm like,
yeah, you're full on nerding out on it.
I know. I'm trying. I'm trying not to get
go too far down the rabbit hole, just because I want to talk about some other ones as well.
Yeah.
But what I like is that you said that it really speaks to like things like war and like bigger issues in a way that kids can grapple with, but not lie to them about. Because I think that's what's so important, especially, you know, well, I don't know. I would say in the days we are in now, but like I feel like no matter what time we're in, those are issues that come up.
Yeah. And so it lets you see things from the child's perspective, but there's also like some like Buddhist principles woven throughout, because these are Asian characters, Asian communities that we're talking about, right? So there's going to be some type of Buddhist or like Zen philosophy, some type of Asian philosophy that is present. And so with the animated series, and they just released earlier this year a live action series that's way better than the movie. It's on Netflix. But the current avatar that that features in it, he's an airbender, and airbenders are like pacifists, vegans, like, you know, like they're just like, they're the hippie granola group, right? And so you have this 10, 12-year-old kid who is the avatar, who's a pacifist, who wakes up 100 years after being frozen in an iceberg during a storm. And he has to end this war. And so how does a pacifist end a war, right? Like, how does someone who is nonviolent participate in and actively work towards ending a war, right? And how do you build up community around you to do that? And so the relationships that the kids build up throughout the series, throughout the duration of the series, is really interesting how they go about that.
All right, I may check it out. I'm going to throw in my nomination. We're not nominating.
What's your nomination?
The next thing I want to talk about, which is another one we talked about before we started recording, which is I loved the book by Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are. And like you, it was always one of my favorite books as a kid. And so when they made the movie, it's probably been 20 years ago now. It feels like it could have been 3 years ago.
Oh my gosh,
I think it's probably been 20.
It probably has, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I thought it was delightful how you said the early aughts. That's just so wonderful. I don't say that, but I'm going to start saying it. It feels like so like Victorian or something. I love it. Anyway, but that was probably made in that was probably also made in the early aughts.
Yes, the early aughts.
And I was nervous, like you said you were, about it because I love the book. But I was blown away by that movie. If you have not seen Where the Wild Things Are, I believe Spike Jonze directed it. It was, in my opinion, I know it was very divisive. There were many people who did not like it.
Yeah.
But I thought it was one of the most beautiful stories. I thought he did an unbelievable job of capturing how children feel, because there weren't a lot of, it wasn't a movie with a ton of words. It wasn't a lot of dialogue.
No, there wasn't.
It relied very heavily on mood and music, like the color and atmosphere and the music to communicate emotion. And I loved it because I felt like that's what children, like a child's world who has a limited vocabulary.
Yeah.
They're experiencing so much of this inner world that they can't fully express. And I felt like he did such an incredible job of like communicating that, of what it's like to have this deep inner world that you can't really communicate in the ways through language and the ways that people expect, but still help you feel what that child might be feeling. And I thought it was believable. Like, I love it. And I've shown it to other people who didn't love it, but it will always be one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
Because I lost my brother to an overdose, and he was very troubled. And he reminds me so much of the kid in this story.
Max.
Yes, with his mom, and like these feelings that he has of like, of loneliness, of being misunderstood, of, you know, like not necessarily being deeply cared for, but then also loving his mom, and like all of this complicated stuff that I could see my brother in that character. And I have never seen that type of person treated with such depth and understanding and care. He wasn't made into, I mean, you saw that he was troubled. Yeah. He had challenges. He was not an easy kid. He had a lot of stuff, and he had rage, and but it was handled in this way that made you understand him. And anyway, so that's my pitch for Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I loved it too. I related to the character Max, I think because there was this like underlying like anger and frustration and rage within him that he would just kind of like go off, you know? And I remember in the book his mom being like, okay, well, you're going to bed without dinner. And then when he comes back from the island with the monsters, like there's food waiting for him in his room. And I thought that was just such a no, like, you know, no, none of that. But it was just like this gesture of just like care and kindness and empathy that that people who often feel misunderstood, right, like don't often get. And I love with the movie, I love the way it felt like you were taking a walk through the book, because there was like little dialogue, and it was a very visual, very
the book is the same way. The book doesn't have a ton of dialogue. It's very visual.
It doesn't. And it, you know, it wasn't until I got older that I realized that like the monsters in the book, like those are projections of Max.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when he's visiting the island with these monsters, it's him on his own journey coming to terms with all these like ugly things about him, that
his feelings,
right? That like, but that they accept him and he learns to accept them, right? But at the same time, like towards the end of his journey, it's like, okay, if you stay there, your monsters will eat you, right? Your feelings are going to like eat you up. And so you have to find a way to like accept your feelings and then move on, as opposed to just like sitting with them forever. Because they will just kind of eat you up from the inside out. And so, and
I think it speaks to the patriarchal stuff that we do to little boys around emotions. Because, you know, in most cases, I prefer to have female characters because I relate more. But I did love the fact that, you know, in the book, it is a male, so it's okay, right? And it should be. But I love that it's speaking to what we do to little boys about not being allowed to have feelings and the complicated relationships they have with feelings. And like you said, him having to start to understand that he's okay. It's okay for him to have all of these feelings so that he can welcome them all in. They can all be a part of him. I also love Catherine Keener in the movie, and the fact that the mom, we get to see more fullness of the mother that you don't necessarily, I don't think, get as much in the book, where you, because her story is also something we can relate to, of feeling stressed and the weight of the world and lifing. And sometimes, especially now that I'm a mom, understanding how that may show up in you not having your best moments with your child. And then, like you said, the little ways that we go back and we try to fix those things, but also not dismissing the damage or the complicated stuff it does to children. Like, anyway, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this one either, but like, I'm going to rewatch it now. Like, you have me so sitting in it. Like, I haven't seen it for years now, and God, I love it. So I'm going to go back to that one.
Yeah. I might go out and buy the book. I feel like I need to have that in my, my
kids read it, but we haven't watched the movie yet. So I think he's getting old enough now to be able to watch it and maybe enjoy it. I mean, here's the thing though, for parents, if you're thinking, like, if you are a child, like if you want to heal your inner child, I think it's a great one for that. If you have kids, it's a movie.
It's scary.
It's a little scary and a little slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, for kids who are used to the YouTube world, they might find it boring, but it's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so then can I bring up one more, and then you can, because the part you just said about the getting used to your feeling, or like being with your feelings, makes me think of what's in the theaters now, which is Inside Out 2, and then of course Inside Out 1.
Yeah.
And it's not like anyone listening hasn't heard of these, so this is not like breaking any ground. But I do just want to give a major shout out to both of those movies as movies that do such a fabulous job of helping kids understand their emotions. And you know what's funny? Who was I talking to? It was for my other podcast, Feminist Founders, not to, promote. I was doing an interview. I can't remember with who now, but she was talking about how the emotional intelligence. Oh, Amy Green Smith. She's a coach, but she was talking about some study from Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart, which I haven't read, and I have complicated feelings about Brene Brown, and we can whatever. But apparently, and I haven't read the book, but she was saying that Brene had done all this surveying of people for that book about how many feelings they could identify. And do you know what apparently after talking to thousands of people, the average number of emotions that most people could identify, how many you think it is, Taina?
I would say like maybe 5.
Yeah, and I said maybe more like, I said how many there are in Inside Out 1 and 2. So I was like, whatever that is, like 8. Yeah. She said it was 3. What? Sad, happy, and angry.
That's it?
Not even the nuances of the variations of what, like elation or joy or no, which is ridiculous. And I can't believe it's true, but that's what she said. So
wow.
The whole point that I love about Inside Out is it starts with, especially like the first one, starting with little kids, and now this other one that adds even more nuances. It starts to give kids language for emotions and to understand, because clearly if adults can't identify more than 3, and I hope that's not true, but like, even if it's only 5 or 7, like if that's the most that most of us can do, we lack an emotional intelligence in this country.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you seen the new one?
I haven't seen the new one yet, but I remember I want to. I will. I remember watching the first one and just being like, well, that was 90 minutes of a therapy session. Like, because it felt, I mean, obviously it's targeted towards kids, but, and that's what this whole episode is about, right? Like things that are targeted towards kids that are helpful for adults or can be good for adults too, that we enjoy. But, it helps me better understand my own emotions and how, like, the way that all functions up in the brain, right? And so, because I think there's a difference between understanding what you're feeling and understanding why you're feeling what you're feeling. And I think the movie does a really good job about describing and explaining the why and helping us see how that plays out. Like it's almost like this like giant thought experiment, right? Like what if my feelings were these characters and these people who live outside of me? Like how would they respond? What would they say? And things like that. And so I saw on the news a couple weeks ago when it was first released that Disney consulted with a child psychologist for both films really, really heavily. And so I thought that, I mean, I figured that they had done something like that. I didn't know to what extent, but the way that she talked about the experience, I was like, oh, wow, okay. Because you can definitely see the effort that they put into it, right? But yeah.
And what's wild to me is, so the new one, you haven't seen it yet.
No.
But so the first one was great. It's really good for little kids because it's really getting to just those sort of very basic core feelings that apparently most adults can name, right?
Yeah.
But the new one is adding more depth because she's becoming a teenager. She's in those tween years, and she is adding on some of these more mature feelings. And one of those is anxiety. And I have never felt more seen in a movie. There was a scene in that movie that, like, I almost cried, and I'm not a crier. I don't cry at movies. And I had tears in my eyes. I was like, I wish that when I was younger, I could have had this movie to help me understand what's happening in my internal world and why I'm feeling this way. And more important than that, for other people to be able to understand what's happening in my internal world.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I could have shown it to my mom and said, Mom, that's what's going inside of me. Like even now I want to be able to say to people, if you need to understand me, go see the movie and watch the anxiety character, especially when she has her spin out that results in basically a panic attack. That's what the inside of my brain feels like so often. And to feel seen in a way that felt really loving and understanding, and the way Joy comes and starts to, in the same way in the first movie she does with sadness, and starts to realize like, oh, sadness isn't bad.
Yeah.
We need sadness. The same way she kind of says like, Joy sort of sees with anxiety like, oh, I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect her. And that's beautiful. It's beautiful, but it's gotten to be too much. And how can I love you through this? And like, it's just, oh, I can't tell you how beautiful it is. So if you know anyone in your life has anxiety, or if you do, but more important, I feel like for people who live with people who have anxiety, to see it and to understand that that is what's happening in our inner world all the time and what that must feel like. I just feel like it gives people a level of empathy in a way that's really like easy to digest. I'm just really grateful for it. And I was going into Inside Out too. Inside Out was my favorite Pixar movie. My son and I have watched it endless amounts of times. He used to love it when he was little. I went into this fully expecting it to be bad. It's like, oh God, why are they making another one? They're gonna screw it up. And I was shocked when I left thinking I loved it as much or more than the first one, and my son liked it better than the first. So which might be why it's made now like $1 billion+ worldwide.
Yeah.
Wild.
I have to go see it this weekend then.
Or wait and rent it. It'll be streaming before you know it.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. That's true. And we have
so
many
quick now. It was already streaming. I saw. I was like, that's still in the theater. So I could introduce movies or shows all the time because I'm fully in the parenting mode. So I have a little kid and I have lots of thoughts, but I want to make sure that you get to share too. Is there another one that you want to bring up?
There is. But before we move on to that, I just want to put a little plug in for the feelings wheel. So like if you are listening and you like struggle with like naming your feelings, like the feelings wheel is a really good tool to use because you can start from the inside where it's like just like the really core feelings like sad, angry, happy.
Those three that everyone can name.
Right. And then you can move outward into a more nuanced, complicated description of what that feeling is based on like your context and your situation and whatnot.
And most
so
of them
help.
And most of them are color coded because what it makes me think of is the box of crayons where you can start with the 3 primary colors.
Yeah.
But from there, we know we can go out and start to get to like, there are 100 shades of pink, right? Pink, and that's even, so there's red, and then you can get to like all these shades of like umber and whatever.
Yeah.
And that's what the feelings wheel helps you do because there are differences between happy and elated. Right? There are differences between angry and furious. And so starting to be able to understand that, and like I actually think if you don't like the feelings wheel names them, if you need to look them up in the dictionary, do it. It's okay. There's no shame in it because the more we can accurately label and then tell people about what we're feeling, it's actually really helpful also for other people to understand.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah. Those words do not mean the same thing. That's why there are different words for them.
There you go. Exactly.
The next one I want to talk about is the movie A Little Princess. And so, and this
another one I haven't seen, so sorry.
This I had on VHS. That's how old it is. And I think it's based on a book, and I think the book is the same author who wrote The Secret Garden, if I'm not mistaken.
That was one of my favorites as a kid. I loved The Secret Garden book and Little Women. Those were like my favorite books as a kid.
Yeah. So it's about a little girl being raised by her dad, and they're not like super, super rich, but they're well off. And he goes off to war and gets injured and loses his memory. And like overnight, the little girl is orphaned because they think her dad is dead. And so she gets put into an orphanage to be raised. And in the orphanage, she gets treated really badly by the headmistress or whatever her name is, the house mom. But she also befriends this little black girl who lives at the orphanage because she works there, and she lives in the attic. And so her and the little black girl become like little besties. And there's a lot of like, I don't know if it's not Buddhist. It's I think it's Hindu. There's a lot of Hindu themes throughout the movie, which is interesting. And so because she's telling the little black girl stories about this Hindu god, but as she's telling the stories, like the film cuts to those scenes, right? And so there's like this really like colorful, mystical world, whereas like the real world is like kind of moody. It's kind of got like that Victorian Gothic feel to it. And so, so just like the contrast there is just really interesting, right? Because you get to see like real life versus like imagination, right? How much bolder and vibrant and alive the imagination is. And then the twist in the story is, well, I don't know if I should give it away for people who may not have seen it.
Maybe you could talk around. I don't know. I would be curious. I mean, also, by the way, like it's ages old, but
it's ages old. But eventually she gets reunited with her dad. And then he also ends up adopting the little black girl. And so then they become like real life sisters. And so they live together. But the reason that movie just like really stuck with me, that I just kind of go back to, or have gone back to over time, is because I lost my dad when I was really young. And so I grew up with like my mom and my brother. And so this idea of like your one parent being your dad was like, it felt like, it felt less like entertainment and more like like a what if story, if that makes sense. And so I love the relationship that she has with her dad too, because like they're so close and they're so connected, and like you can see how much they care for each other. And it's and you asked me who was in it, like what actors were in it, and I couldn't I can't name any of the actors. Like I think they literally just did that movie and then maybe nothing else. But it was done so well. Like it was acted so well. They did such a good job. Especially for like child actors, you know? So, yeah, it's a really good story about just like family relationships and going through hardships. And then that whole they like reunite in the rain at night. Like it was just like, oh my God, like it's beautiful. And it's also just a very beautiful movie. Like just the aesthetic of it is really beautiful. I like beauty is like one of my top 3 core values. So if it's not
that's
pretty,
probably why we both also really like going back to Where the Wild Things Are, because it's just so beautiful.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. If it's not beautiful, I don't like it. And this movie was it was beautifully done. It was just so beautifully done. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to put a plug in for yet another animated movie, so I'm going to do I'm just going to throw out a couple of animated movies, because I don't want to get too bogged down in the details of these, because most people have seen them, but I really love Soul, and my kid really loves Soul, which was surprising to me. It's another Pixar, I think. I don't think it's Disney. I'm pretty sure it's Pixar. I tend to like Pixar movies better than Disney movies generally. One, I love the fact that finally Pixar had characters who were Black that were primary characters. Didn't necessarily love that they went with Tina Fey for the other voice. I love Tina Fey. I thought it was a missed opportunity there, I think. But having Jamie Foxx as the primary voice for the other main character was great. And it was dealing with death in a way that was so wonderful. If you have little kids and you're like, I don't want to talk to my kid about death when they're still really little. If you are like me and don't want to use necessarily any deeply religious thing to describe it, it handled it really well in a way that didn't frighten my child and helped him really sort of just have some language and like a thing. And he still talks about that when we talk about death, which is great. So I love that one. And I'll let you respond to these in a second, but I'm just going to throw these out. And then I want to throw out 2 other Pixar movies, or I think one's Disney and the other's Pixar, for this reason alone, that they are not about, they are girls in charge, like girls at the lead. And they are not about these poor princesses trying to like get a man. Okay. One is Turning Red. I don't know if you've seen that one yet. Really great. It's really dealing with young girls kind of going through this change of their life where they're becoming little ladies, right? And it's about that part of, it's basically about puberty. But it's about friendship too. Like it's about these girls and their core friendship. And it's about the difficult relationships between moms and daughters. But it's not, I mean, yes, they're trying to go see this boy band they love, but it's not about getting a man, getting a prince, trying to win over someone. And similarly, Brave, I loved because that is one of the princess Disney movies, but it's a princess who is not about trying to find her man, get her man, save her man, blah, 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 blah. It is about her and her mom and their complicated relationship, which I just think is fantastic. So those are my 3 last animated movies, I think, that I'm going to throw out. If you want to respond to any of those, otherwise I have a couple other not.
I've only seen Brave out of those 3. I haven't seen Turning Red or Soul.
Oh, you got to see Soul, Taina. I really think you'll love it. That one is just really fun and funny and also beautiful.
Yeah, I'm not too much into like animated movies, and so like
I know I get it, but it's one that is more for adults, I think, than kids. I mean, it's for kids, but it's one that like the adults can actually enjoy. I don't know if you already have your own thoughts about like death and dying and what happens and all that. It may not be helpful, but all right, fine. But Brave is great. Turning Red, I think you'll enjoy either way because it's just really fun and cute.
No, Turning Red did look cute. I don't remember why I didn't watch it, but I'm definitely putting that one on my list.
Because you're an adult who doesn't have kids, and so that makes sense. But it is good, and I think you'll like it. It's cute.
My last one that I want to throw out there is Moana. So,
love that
the Disney movie, and so it's another. Is she technically classified as a Disney princess?
I don't remember. Is it? If it's Disney, I guess she is.
Okay. Yeah. And
I don't know. I'm not a princess person personally, but
yeah, she has like this amazing relationship with her grandmother, which I had growing up. And so I can relate to that. And there's no love interest in the movie, which I loved.
Forgot that one. Yes, me too.
Yeah. No love interest. She's just really trying to save her people and do right by her people, while also trying to remain true to herself and to her values. And so she goes on this incredible journey in the water to do all of that. And I remember the scene where at the end, where she finally meets the angry goddess and realizes that like, this was stolen from you. Like, you just want this back. Like, and then she gives it to her, and immediately she just like tempers down and becomes just like this beautiful part of the island. Like it was such an amazing way to depict like the restoration of a woman who has been harmed and how she can be healed. Yes. Yeah.
I love that
too. By like returning something to her, by validating her experience and her feelings and whatnot. And so I think Disney did a really beautiful job
and her
with that
power. And by the way, the music is great too. I love the music on that. And I'm not always do, but that one has great music. And The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, all things that some people feel about him, whatever. He was really funny in it. And did you know they're making a new one that's coming out this year?
I did. Okay, I did. So
I'm super excited. My son wants to see it too.
It's supposed to come out in November, I think. So I'm excited about that.
So I'm sure we'll air this before that so people can see it. Okay, I'm going to put on a live action older. I'm going back to the aughts. So the thing is, I'm looking right now. Came out in 06. I'm going to start using that all the time. And that's Aquila and the Bee. I don't know if you remember it or saw it, but it's got Keke Palmer before she was Sassy Pants Keke Palmer. We know now.
Yeah.
She was still Sassy Pants Keke Palmer, but she was much younger. It was young Keke Palmer. And wasn't it Lawrence Fishburne maybe? I'm trying to remember who the dad was. Yeah. And I don't know. Listen, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember enjoying it. I think it's one of those that's a little more like saccharine cutesy, but I did love the fact that this is like that she shows up and that we're centering this young Black girl and her intelligence, and that she shows up and like goes after something that she wants and her dream, and like she discovers this power she has and that she can use to do something really amazing. I am not an expert enough to know and it's been a long time since I've seen it. So don't come after me if there are things I'm not remembering about it that were not great. But I love that core part of it, because the problem is, I feel like there's not enough. We know this. Movies out there that depict non-white, and I don't like to use non-white, but I'm just saying most of the movies we see are white characters, white children that are showing excellence, doing something amazing, overcoming all of that. And there's not enough movies that show the same for little Black girls, little Black boys to see themselves reflected. And too often it is just the overcoming, which again, this is another one of those. I wish that I could offer more of like, here is a character that's a Black child just excelling without it having to be about overcoming.
Yeah, without tragedy.
Exactly.
Or trauma. Yeah.
I know. So I wish I could give more of those. Maybe you have some in your head, maybe not, because there's not enough of them. So if I
can't think of any off the top of my head.
Please make more of that content.
Yeah. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's too bad. And then I'm going to throw out I'm going to go way old school. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Punky Brewster.
Yes. Okay. She was my favorite.
I'm throwing that out there too. I don't even know if there's anywhere you can watch those anymore. And again, let me say, I haven't watched those since I was young, but I just want to throw her out there as when I was young, and again, this is the privilege I had of having a white girl reflected back at me, but having a girl who was spunky, sassy, whatever word you want to use, like who wasn't afraid to sort of be herself and be different and like use that as what makes her special and a superpower. Like that was really rare at the time. And I'm really grateful that was there for me when I was young.
Yeah. Punky Brewster was cool.
She was so cool.
She was so cool. I just remember being like, oh my goodness, she's so cool. She's so different and she's not afraid. And
it's the big piece with it. She wasn't afraid, that she's like, this is who I am. I mean, I don't know how realistic it was, but but I did love that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any others, but hopefully that gives people a place to start.
Yeah. I think you mentioned Punky Brewster, and my mind immediately went to the Magic School Bus and Miss Frizzle.
And we are such different, and this is the fun of us being in different generations. Even if we're not that far, we are far enough that we probably I know Magic School Bus, but I didn't really watch it.
Yeah, it was always just so fun because she was just like this quirky teacher that was she was a good teacher. She was interesting. She always had like these really quirky outfits. And then in the Magic School Bus, you would get on the Magic School Bus and shrink down to like microscopic size and go like do science adventures. And so I thought it was just, I mean, I loved it as a kid. And now as an adult, I'm like, this is just a great way to teach kids about science, because it's like you're literally putting them in the science as opposed to it being like a chart or a graph. You know what I mean? And so, the Magic School Bus was one of my favorites growing up, for sure.
Mr. Rogers was one of my favorites too, so I'll give him a shout out too.
Yeah,
missed you, Mr. Rogers. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just end by saying too, I feel like young kids today. Have I ever sounded older though when I say kids today? But I think that they're so lucky in that popular culture, like TV, movies, all of that, books are doing such a better job of representing differences. There's such a long way to go, especially to make it more mainstream. But there are so many things out there. And of course, there are those who are trying to fight to suppress all of that. And we need to continue to do a good job of not. And we didn't even get into kids' books. Another time we might be able to do that, because I have read some amazing books with my child to help expose him to folks of all different ways of existing in this world. And there are so many things out there that I never saw as a kid. So I'm grateful to people who are creating that, to people who are thinking about it and putting stuff out there. And I love that Inside Out 2 is made $1 billion and is trying to, is doing that in a way that is really thoughtful. I wish it was more representative. So there's still many strides to make.
Yeah.
But anyway, just want to say, like, it's getting better. Slowly, like it is for me to remember, because there are times when I get real bogged down in the nothing's better. There is some things.
Yeah. Definitely go watch The Last Airbender with Gus. Definitely go watch it.
Okay. If you watch Inside Out 2.
I will. I
Okay.
will. It is on my weekend to-do list.
I think Where the Wild Things Are is going to be actually the first thing I do, though. I think that's going on my weekend. In fact, my son and I have a little date night tonight because my husband's going to be out. So maybe I can find it on
that'll be
to
fun.
stream tonight. I would love to watch it again. Like,
Yeah.
I've forgotten how much I loved it. And that was a movie that really made me also like,
Yeah.
and I'm not a crier,
Yeah.
but it was just
for sure.
So if anyone watches it, let us know what you thought. Messy Liberation
at gmail.com.
Send us yours that we didn't see. Tell us.
Yeah.
Especially me, because I do have a kid, but even you too. Like, I think we both want to I think we'd love to hear more.
For
Because
sure.
I am sure there are some that we didn't. Maybe we'll even do a part 2. So let us know.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening. Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen?
I know people say that all the time. And if you're like me, often you just go on to the next podcast. But truly, taking that moment to do that will really help us reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.